Well, the time has come. The end of an era is truly upon us. A certain legendary hero has undertaken his final mission and will not be seen or heard from ever again. No matter how much certain moronic companies may try to bullshit us otherwise. No, it really is over. We have reached the end of the truly epic saga of Metal Gear. You heard right, after nearly 3 decades, this amazing franchise is no more. Sure, there might be some retarded pachinko spin-off or something eventually, but as for actual fully fledged games, the latest entry was also the last. This is actually quite a depressing fact, especially for me, as this is probably my all-time favorite franchise, all things considered. I have followed and for the most part loved this series since I was first introduced to it so many years ago, but even I missed out on quite a few entries the first time around. After all, when the franchise was in its infancy, so was I. In addition, it also has quite a few more additions than many might realize. As such, I've decided, fuck it, it's not enough to just talk about this latest entry, we need to look at and celebrate the entire franchise from beginning to end. And I'm not just talking about the main entries either. No, I'm going to go over everything, including spin-offs and non-canonical games, so we better just get started. There will be plenty of spoilers here, but hopefully that won't ruin anything, as we have ourselves a Metal Gear Retrospective. Let's start at the very beginning with the very first game, simply called Metal Gear. This game was originally only released in Japan and Europe for the MSX2 home computer system, so essentially, most of the Western world didn't really know much about it until it and its sequel was re-released as a bonus feature for the subsistence version of Metal Gear Solid 3 almost 20 years later. The game stars Solid Snake, a rookie member of a United States Special Forces unit called Foxhound. He's been tasked with infiltrating an enemy fortress known as Outer Heaven in order to destroy a powerful weapon known as Metal Gear. Snake isn't the only one involved in this mission though. Oh, he is in the field alone, but he does have a support team backing him up over his transceiver. First and foremost, there's his commanding officer, Big Boss. He gives Snake his orders and objectives, as well as a few helpful hints every once in a while. Secondly, there are a few members of a local resistance group providing Snake with valuable intel as well. There's Schneider, who provides information regarding the location of important items and weapons, Diane, who can provide intel on enemy units, and finally there's Jennifer, an agent on the inside who assists Snake more directly by opening locked doors and providing necessary weaponry. Before we move on, I guess I can already mention something that can be a bit of an issue with this game. As stated, these characters provide backup via Snake's transceiver, but before you can get any intel from them, you need to know their frequencies. Sure, you do get most of their frequencies from rescued hostages and the like, but some, like Schneider's, are never told to you. No, really, the only way to get Schneider's frequency, at least in the PS2 and PS3 ports of the game, is to either look it up online or wait until he contacts you, which doesn't happen until quite a bit into the game. Well, that's just fucking brilliant, isn't it? This guy is apparently the only one who knows the location of a critically necessary weapon, but I pretty much have to guess what his frequency is. Wonderful! Either way, in order to complete his mission, i.e. find and destroy Metal Gear, Snake must first find and rescue Grey Fox, another Foxhound agent that was sent in before Snake but has since gone missing. Snake also has to procure whatever weaponry he can find on site, as he's sent in carrying nothing but a pack of cigarettes. While you do start out barehanded, you'll eventually collect a fairly wide yet relatively standard assortment of weaponry, from a handgun that can be equipped with a silencer to a remote-controlled missile launcher. While most of these weapons do come in very handy throughout the game, you're not really supposed to run around shooting everyone though. You see, that was really the big thing with this game. It's about stealth. Instead of killing everyone, you're supposed to avoid detection as much as possible. Okay, so there were games before this one that also utilized stealth elements, but this was the first game that really focused on those elements, effectively creating the stealth game subgenre. The game also contains quite a few different items and equipment to collect. There's a pair of binoculars that lets you see into the adjacent screens, the rations that refill your health, and of course there are the key cards. Oh, those wonderful, glorious key cards! I know nothing thrills me more than having to go in and out of a menu and cycle through about a dozen of these bastards every single time I want to open a fucking door! I fucking love it! Honestly though, these cards can be a serious pain in the arse to actually use. For those not familiar with them, these cards rather obviously work as keys, with each card having a level that corresponds to certain doors. For instance, a level 3 door can only be opened with a level 3 card. The problem with this is that you can only equip one weapon and one item at a time. This means that whenever you encounter a locked door, you have to go in and out of the equipment menu until you find the correct card. Okay, so this isn't necessarily a problem all the time, but yeah, this does get pretty damn annoying. Before we move on, I do want to point out one more thing regarding the items, specifically things like ammo, explosives, and rations. You see, these items actually respawn whenever you exit whatever room you find them in, making it relatively easy to stock up. Just enter and exit the room in question a bunch of times and there you go, fully stocked. Okay, so I guess it can be a little annoying going in and out of these rooms all the time, and you could call this a bit of a cheat, but really it's not. It's an exploit, huge difference. Something else worth mentioning is the life meter and the class rating. When you start the game, both of these are fairly low, but after saving a certain amount of hostages, they will start to increase. Yup, for every 5 hostages you save, you'll gain a new class, meaning more health and the ability to hold more ammunition and rations. In short, make sure to save all the hostages you can. So after finding Grey Fox, Snake is informed that Metal Gear, the weapon he needs to destroy, is an all-terrain, nuclear-equipped walking battle tank capable of launching a nuclear strike from anywhere on the planet. He's also told that the only person who knows how to destroy Metal Gear is its developer, Dr. Drago Petrovich Madnar, but unfortunately he's being held prisoner in an unknown location. Before he can find him and get any details though, Snake has to contend with a few bosses first. Unfortunately, none of them are all that intriguing, especially challenging, or very memorable. Well, I guess the so-called Bloody Brads are a little interesting in that they're actually a reference to the Terminator. You see, originally they were actually called Arnolds, but for some reason they decided to change some of the characters' names, including theirs, for the international releases. Because as we all know, names always change depending on which country you're in. For instance, in certain parts of the world, my name apparently changes to fucking Homo Prick. Kind of awkward, but what can you do? Anyway, after reaching Dr. Madnar, he informs Snake that Metal Gear can be destroyed by placing explosives on its legs in a very specific order, which doesn't really make any sense. Seriously, why wouldn't this machine be affected by an explosive just because it was placed on the right leg instead of the left, even though it will have an effect if you place it there a few seconds later? Well, I guess it would be somewhat boring if you could just plump down a couple of bombs and that was that, but considering how long this sequence is, there's no way you'll actually remember all of it, forcing you to write it down. Even then though, you're still forced to make a 50-50 guess at the end anyway, as you're never told which leg to place the last explosive on. Either way, while making his way towards the underground basement where Metal Gear is housed, Snake suddenly gets a call from Schneider. He's about to reveal the identity of Outer Heaven's leader, but he gets cut off before he has a chance to do so. Snake continues towards his objective, which he'll reach if he can just manage to avoid the many pitfalls leading up to it. That's right, I forgot to mention the pitfalls, didn't I? Well, occasionally you'll come across a room that may contain one or more of these pitfalls, but you won't be able to see them since, well, they're hidden. If you step on one of them, the floor will start to open up, and if you're caught in that hole, you die instantly. Or you don't fall in or anything, you just die. Makes sense to me! So after dodging the pitfalls and making it to the basement, Snake frees one last hostage who tells him that the leader of Outer Heaven was his commanding officer, Big Boss, all along. Snake then finally makes it to Metal Gear for what is, at least in my opinion, a massive letdown of a fight. Sure, it technically works, but the actual Metal Gear never does a single thing. It never even moves. Seriously, the only obstacles here are a pair of wall-mounted lasers that occasionally fires a few pot shots at Snake. Yeah, that's exciting! So once he's destroyed Metal Gear and set off the base's self-destruct sequence, Snake is confronted by none other than Big Boss. After another relatively easy and underwhelming fight, Big Boss is defeated and Snake escapes as Outer Heaven explodes behind him. Unfortunately, it seems Big Boss has survived as the game ends with him contacting Snake vowing to get his revenge. And indeed, this wasn't the last we heard of Big Boss, but it would be a while before he resurfaced. Hell, most of the Western world hadn't even encountered him once yet. The MSX just wasn't that popular in this part of the world, but the NES certainly was. As such, Konami decided, quite reasonably, that they needed to make a version of this game for that system as well. They really shouldn't have. Yeah, the NES version of Metal Gear is a now relatively infamous piece of spectacular fuckery. Instead of just doing a straight port, they decided to implement quite a few changes, none of which make any sense at all. Okay, so this is still pretty much the same game, but the differences, however minor, really do add up to one massively worse experience. One of the first differences is the actual opening of the game. For some reason, this version starts off with Snake and 3 other unknown soldiers who we never see again, jumping out of an airplane into this weird jungle area. The MSX version just started off outside the enemy base, but here you have to trek through this bullshit jungle area first. Then there's the matter of what happens when you die. Whereas the original version had a decent amount of checkpoints based on your progression in the game, this version only has a few checkpoints based on, and I'm totally fucking serious here, your mother-humping rank. I wish I was kidding, but no. Until you get your rank up, you have to start from the beginning of the game each and every time you die, no matter how far you manage to get. This has to be one of the dumbest, most ridiculous ways to handle checkpoints I have ever experienced in my life. Seriously, what the fuck were they thinking? To be fair, you do at least get to keep anything you've collected before you die, but still, having to go back to the start of the game every time that happens is just ludicrous. Who gives two dingleberries what my rank is? Just have some damn checkpoints, you fucking donut brains! The problems certainly don't end there either. They even managed to fuck up the way items are handled. As with the original, you can still restock ammo and rations by just going in and out of the rooms containing these items, but get this, you have to check if your stock is full yourself by going in and out of the damn menus. Yeah, in the original, you got a message saying you couldn't hold anymore once you were fully restocked. Here, you can just keep on collecting these items endlessly, even though you only get a certain amount of them anyway. No, it's not exactly impossible to just check if the quantities are actually increasing or not, but it's just yet another unnecessary inconvenience. Then there's how you can actually use rations. In the original, you could not only use them manually, but also have them equipped in order to automatically refill your health when it ran out. While this game does still allow you to equip rations if you want, it's completely pointless. They can only be used manually from the item screen anyway, so why even allow them to be equipped? On top of that, you could even use up all your rations accidentally. The original prevented you from using one if your health was already full, but here you can use every single one of your rations if you're not careful. The game will not stop you. Well, isn't this still pretty easy to avoid though? I mean, you do have a life meter, right? Sure, but unfortunately, it's not visible in the item screen. What the fuck is it with this game anyway? Why is it seemingly going out of its way to screw you over? None of the changes implemented here are for the better in any way. They're just a nuisance and a surefire way to trick the player into making some kind of mistake. It's almost as if they don't actually want people to get too far into this game. Like, there's something they don't want us to see. And you know what? I think there is. You see, one of the biggest and most significant changes in this version is the fact that there isn't actually a Metal Gear in it at all. Really, they were actually dumb enough to remove the thing the game is fucking named after. Instead, we just get this ridiculous computer thing. You said I was going after a Metal Gear. I don't think this thing quite qualifies as that, you fucking liars! There are several other changes as well, like the replacement of the helicopter fight with a pair of machine gun wielding douchebags, the removal of the parachuting sequence and the replacement of the parachute itself with a certain glove, ha ha, and of course the removal of the nuclear explosion and Big Boss's revenge message at the end. Any way you look at it though, this game is just a mess. I guess it's playable, but just barely. It doesn't contain any of the elements that made the original so unique and memorable. Even Hideo Kojima, the original game's creator, absolutely hated this turd, and why shouldn't he? It did nothing but shit on the reputation of a pretty great game, and it's a crime that it was ever released at all. Unfortunately, it was released, and weirdly, it actually sold quite well, especially in North America. Konami therefore decided to make a direct sequel specifically for the Western market, and surprise, surprise, it's actually not all that bad. That's right, in 1990, Snake returned to the battlefield, and this time he was out for revenge. At least, that's what the title said. In any case, this was actually a pretty competent game. Oh, believe me, it's far from perfect, but I have to admit, it is somewhat enjoyable. Eventually. Yeah, that's pretty much this game's biggest problem. It starts off way too challenging. Sure, it's possible to get past it, I did after all, but I'm fairly certain most people will give up long before I did. Hell, I almost gave up myself, but I'm glad I didn't. In any case, Snake's Revenge tells the story of Snake, who's now a lieutenant, going on another mission to infiltrate another base and take down another Metal Gear. Sounds pretty similar to his first mission, but there actually are a few notable differences. First of all, he's not going in alone this time. He's actually aided by John Turner, an expert on infiltration, and Nick Meyer, an explosives disposal and weapons expert. Well, I say Snake's aided, but although these men do follow him into the field, they immediately leave him in order to complete their own objectives. Nice! Just leave me to fend for myself yet again, why don't you? Selfish fucks. Can I at least get some weapons or something this time? I can? Well, okay then. Yeah, you actually do get to start with a few weapons this time, not just your fists. Instead, you get both a knife and a handgun. You'll still die quicker than an ant on the sun, but at least you get something. I also have to point out that Snake himself seems to have changed quite a bit. Just look at him, he turned himself into a damn Rob Liefeld drawing. He really bulked up big time, and yet his head seems to have shrunk. Seriously, his dimensions are just completely ridiculous. Also, what's with the orange jumpsuit? Did Snake just escape from prison or something? I just don't get it. Either way, the first thing Snake needs to do is infiltrate the enemy base itself, and just doing that is tricky enough to make some people end the game right there. Honestly, this first section is brutal. There are searchlights to try and avoid, patrols on mini helicopters, and a seemingly endless supply of reinforcements that get called in if so much as a pixel of your body is detected by anything. If you do manage to make it to the base though, you still won't be able to enter it without some assistance from John. You see, while Snake hides behind a bush, John lets the enemy guards capture him, allowing Snake to sneak in undetected. Not sure the guards wouldn't just lock the door behind them or send for some replacements or something, but whatever, Snake's in. After gathering some more equipment and probably dying quite a few times, Snake will eventually make it to the first of several side-scrolling areas. You heard right, side-scrolling areas. These are another addition this game adds, and honestly, they're dreadful. No, honestly, these sections are just awful. Anyone with even a shred of common sense would shut the game off after just a few seconds of this bullshit. Okay, so I didn't, but that's because I'm a complete nutcase. The first issue is with the controls. Yeah, they work, but they feel kind of weird. You see, while you normally use the A button to fire your weapon and the B button to punch or use your knife, you here use the B button to fire and the A button to jump. Yeah, they actually made them the complete opposite. It's also a little annoying that you always start these sections with the knife selected as your weapon. No, it's not exactly difficult to change it or anything, but the knife is pretty much useless here, so why not just start me off with the gun instead? It's so easy to forget or overlook this until you try and attack an enemy, and by then it might be too late. Speaking of which, that's the main issue here, the enemies. You obviously can't just sneak by them as they're completely blocking your way, and even though you may occasionally be able to kill one or two before you're noticed, chances are that you will be spotted, which will cause the entire world to swarm out and attack you at once. If you somehow manage to make it through this first side-scrolling section, it's time for the first boss fight with, what else? A group of armored American football players. Of course! Am I drunk? I must be drunk. I don't know how, but there's just no way I could possibly be seeing this if I'm actually sober. Seriously, it's a bunch of fucking football players. What the hell are they doing here? It's like putting Shaquille O'Neal in a fighting game. Wait. Speaking of boss fights, most of the ones in this game are actually pretty good. The Grenadiers can be a little annoying in that they take away a good chunk of your health if they hit you even once, and the fight with what turns out to be a spy impersonating John may be just a tad cramped and unfair, but all in all, they're still pretty decent encounters. However, one boss I for one think is absolutely ridiculous is the tank fight. Holy hell is this battle retarded! Okay, so trying to destroy a tank that's driving up and down a bridge by placing down a bunch of mines in its path, that's fair enough. However, as you pretty much have to go up at least one screen for the tank to show itself regularly, things quickly become rather unfair. The thing is that you have absolutely no way of knowing where the tank is in relation to the screen you're on. It could be 2 screens up going up, or it could be on the next screen on its way down. You just don't know. Hell, you can be, and I was, killed between 2 screens because you're going up just as the tank is coming down. That is fucking asinine! Either way, after defeating the football players of Doom, Snake eventually learns that the enemy is transporting a load of mass-produced Metal Gears on a cargo ship. After locating and blowing up the ammo dump, Snake escapes the now sinking ship with the help of the team's helicopter pilot. Well, that was a rather short game. Sure, it was quite tricky, which definitely increased its playtime, but this was still a pretty sudden ending. Hell, there wasn't even a final boss or anything, and yeah, you know where this is going. Of course the game isn't over yet. No, even though you just destroyed a whole cargo ship full of Metal Gears, none of them were the Metal Gear, the new prototype the enemy apparently still has at their main base. Nick has also gone missing, so Snake heads to the base and is told to contact Jennifer, their spy on the inside. After doing so, she informs Snake that the enemy commander is planning to use the new Metal Gear to launch nukes all over the world. Why?
What's life without whimsy?
No, seriously, we're never told why he wants to do this. I guess he's just an evil dick. Either way, Snake eventually finds Nick, who manages to inform him that Jennifer has been captured before he dies from his injuries. Going further into the base, Snake finally confronts the enemy commander, who turns out to be none other than Big Boss once again. He's apparently undergone some surgery since last time though, as he's apparently a cyborg now, even though he looks more like Jason Voorhees in a purple jumpsuit. After duking it out with Snake for a bit and seemingly losing, Big Boss suddenly transforms into Galvatron? Okay. Seriously though, this battle is pretty tough, or at least it can be. You see, there is a bit of a trick to it, and once you figure it out, it's actually not that bad. Basically, you just have to go back to the previous room, wait for him to turn up, get as close to him as possible, and spam him with mines. Do it fast enough and keep an eye on your health, and before you know it, Big Boss is big dead. This in turn sets off Metal Gear's launch timer as Snake rushes off to stop it, saving Jennifer along the way. Unfortunately, there's only one way to destroy Metal Gear, by steering several remote-controlled missiles through a relatively small air shaft. The missiles also move fairly quickly, and there are gates in the shaft that you could potentially crash into, so all in all, this is rather tricky. It's also kinda lame to have yet another Metal Gear fight where the stupid thing doesn't even move. It just doesn't really feel like you're going up against a nuclear-equipped walking battle tank, because really, you're going up against a difficult-to-navigate air shaft. Not quite the same, is it? In any case, once Metal Gear is destroyed, we're told that the UN apparently declared World Peace Day in the aftermath of this mission, because yeah, isn't that how it works? It's not like there are a ton of wars all over the place, it was just this one conflict that fucked up everything. Oh, and nice of you to end on the image of Snake giving us a weird pedo smile. That's not disturbing at all. In all seriousness though, this is actually not that bad of a game. Sure, it has quite a few issues and it is a bit of a struggle to get into, but once you do, it's not that bad of an experience. For the most part. That said, it still doesn't quite feel like a true sequel, and I'm not alone in thinking so. You see, Hideo Kojima was not involved with the production of this game. In fact, he apparently didn't even know about it until he happened to run into a member of its development team during a train ride in Tokyo. This developer implored Kojima to make a true sequel to his original game, and by the end of the train ride, Kojima already had the basic idea mapped out. So could a game that was thought up in such a short time possibly deliver a good or even decent experience? Well, actually, it goes way beyond that from the very instant it begins. Seriously, this opening with this music is just awesome, and it certainly doesn't stop there, but let's just start with the story, shall we? In what has to be, at least nowadays, an alternate 1990s, the world is apparently reaching an age of world peace as the Cold War superpowers are resolving their various conflicts and the threat of nuclear war is gone. Unfortunately, a military junta takes over Zanzibar land, a small country bordering the Soviet Union, the Middle East and China, and begins attacking nuclear disposal sites all over the world and seizing their stockpiles. As the world's only remaining nuclear power, Zanzibar land then begins invading their neighboring countries. In addition to that, the world's oil supply also dries up, but luckily a Czech biologist, Dr. Kio Marv, develops something called Oilix, a microbe capable of synthesizing petroleum. Not so luckily, Dr. Marv is kidnapped by Zanzibar land in an effort to gain global military dominance. Hoping to prevent disaster, Foxhound sends Solid Snake to infiltrate Zanzibar land and rescue Dr. Marv. In other words, the world is pretty much doomed unless one lone soldier can successfully infiltrate and take down a rogue, nuclear-capable military nation. Yeah, kinda regretting that whole world peace thing now, aren't we? In all seriousness, this is some pretty serious shit, but it's also kinda convoluted. I mean, not only did all the world's nuclear powers somehow agree to get rid of their nukes, not only did the world's oil supply just suddenly dry up, but in addition, a single scientist managed to create a solution to a problem we're still struggling with in just a few months at the most? I don't think so. That said, the storyline isn't really as important as whether or not the game itself is enjoyable, which it definitely is. There are also quite a few new additions, and the first one is the radar. This radar shows a grid where the middle square represents the screen you're currently on, and the rest represents the adjacent screens. It also displays any enemies as white dots and Snake as a red dot. It's not like this radar is without its limitations though. For instance, it doesn't show you which direction the enemies are facing, and it doesn't work in small enclosed areas. It will also go offline if you're spotted, so all in all, it's a very helpful tool, but it certainly doesn't make the game a cakewalk. Then there's the addition of a crawl mode. Yeah, this may not seem like such a big deal, but trust me, it makes a pretty big difference. For one thing, you need to crawl in order to, for instance, make it inside the enemy base, and for another, it's useful for evading enemies after being spotted, as you can just hide underneath a truck or something and wait them out. Because as we all know, a highly trained soldier would never think to look for a fleeing enemy under a truck. That would require them to, like, bend down and lie in the dirt and stuff. What sort of soldier would do that? A fucking weird one. Another seemingly minor but actually quite important change has to do with the items. Unlike the original game, the items here don't immediately respawn when you exit a room, so you'll have to be a bit more careful this time around. Again, pretty minor change, but trust me, you'll definitely notice it. You should also notice that the rations now actually come in a few different varieties. Although they all do pretty much the same thing, this actually does come into play later on. For instance, you'll need to use one type of ration as bait and another as a way to traverse certain hazardous puddles. Anyway, after successfully infiltrating the base, Snake seemingly finds Dr. Marv, but of course it's a trap set up by Black Ninja, a super fast and super sneaky ninja and the first boss of the game. After being taken down, Black Ninja reveals himself to be none other than Kyle Schneider, the Resistance member from the Outer Heaven uprising. He claims that after Snake completed his mission, NATO launched a bombing campaign against Outer Heaven, essentially trying to wipe the base and everyone there off the map. Fortunately, someone who Schneider doesn't actually name apparently saved him and several other Resistance members and gave them all a new place to call home. Before he dies, Schneider also tells Snake to follow a man in a green beret in order to find the secret cell where Dr. Marv is being held. Unfortunately, Dr. Marv is apparently trapped inside a secret room behind one of the walls of the cell as he's heard tapping some sort of code on the wall. Even more unfortunate is the fact that this code can be rather tricky to decipher. Yeah, they kinda fucked up this whole code thing. According to Snake's new commanding officer, Roy Campbell, the game manual should contain instructions on how to decipher the code, but that's just not true. Seriously, they actually forgot to include these instructions in the initial international re-releases. Okay, so they sorta fixed it for the HD versions, but still, kind of a big mistake. In any case, after figuring out that the tap code actually reveals a radio frequency, Snake gives it a call and is greeted by Dr. Drago Petrovich Madnar, the designer of the original Outer Heaven Metal Gear. He reveals that he was captured along with Dr. Marv while they were in America, and that Marv was moved to a tower building to the north of their current location a few days ago. In order to find him though, Snake first has to make it through this incredibly annoying swamp maze. There's only one fairly narrow path to follow, but as it's hidden, you'll constantly fall off and sink into the swamp. It just takes so damn long to get through this, and as you'll actually have to traverse this area several times, you should expect to see this place in your fucking nightmares. When you eventually do get through the swamp, it's time to fight the so-called Running Man, who, as you may have guessed, is, well, a running man. While it may initially seem like there's no way to defeat this Speedy Gonzales wannabe, it's actually really easy. Just place mines in his path and run after him, and he'll just keep running into them like an absolute idiot. He basically kills himself. Anyway, after also taking down a Hind D with a bunch of Stinger missiles, Snake finds and rescues Holly White, an undercover CIA agent who infiltrated Zanzibarland as a journalist. She informs Snake that Dr. Marv apparently sent them a message via a carrier pigeon that unfortunately flew up to the roof. After first dealing with Red Blaster, a grenade-wielding assassin, and then catching the pigeon, it turns out that Marv's message is some sort of code. Well, I say code, but it's really just a radio frequency written upside down that allows you to contact Keo Marv himself. Unfortunately, he doesn't speak any English, so Snake is unable to understand him. Thankfully, Dr. Madnar has a solution. Find Gustava Hefner, the STB agent that gave Madnar and Marv their microtransmitters. She doesn't have a radio and she is wearing an enemy uniform as a disguise, but as the only female soldier in the entire fortress, there should be at least one place where she'd be alone. That's right, I'm talking about the one place where no man would go. The one area completely devoted to women. No, not the kitchen. Or the laundry room. Or whatever the hell that is, you sick fuck! I'm talking about the women's bathroom! Seriously, what's wrong with you? So, after Snake finds and meets up with Gustava, she contacts Marv, who tells her that he's held in a prison on the other side of a large crevice to the north. Luckily, Gustava knows about a shortcut through the sewers, and even luckier, there just happens to be an elevator leading down to it right there in the bathroom. Wait, what? Seriously, why the hell is there an elevator to the sewers in the women's bathroom? Yeah, I know, it's just a silly way to progress and all, but from a storyline perspective, it just doesn't make any sense. Seriously, why would anyone put an elevator in a bathroom? What sort of purpose could that possibly serve? I mean, what the fuck? Either way, Snake and Gustava use the elevator, and after rescuing Dr. Madnar, they all head to the crevice and start crossing the bridge leading to the other side, when suddenly... Yes, sadly, Gustava gets mortally wounded as something blows up the bridge. She gives Snake her brooch, but she is unable to explain what it's for before dying. Dr. Madnar is then taken away as Snake is suddenly greeted by Grey Fox piloting the new Metal Gear. He wants Snake to go home before he gets killed and then leaves him behind. As there's no option to just give up and call for an extraction, Snake now needs to figure out a new way to get across the crevice, and it turns out Holly has a solution. Just use a hang glider from a veranda in the tower building. On the way there though, Snake is unfortunately ambushed in an elevator by an assassination team calling themselves the Four Horsemen. Really? 4 Horsemen? That's really what you're going with? Ooh, I'm really intimidated now! Why don't you just go all the way with it and call yourself something truly terrifying, like Ultra Box? What? You're kidding, right? That was actually their original name? What sort of morons came up with that? And why? Well, apparently they were called Ultra Box as a reference to the British pop group Ultra Vox, as both words are apparently spelled and pronounced the same in Japan. Seems pretty random, doesn't it? I mean, is it because they always do their battles like this?
This means nothing to me.
Anyway, after defeating the Horsemen, who actually look more like astronauts than assassins, the elevator plummets to the ground floor and is left unusable. Snake is therefore forced to take another elevator up to the 10th floor and use an external circular staircase to reach the veranda on the 20th floor while being chased by a bunch of guards. Upon reaching the veranda, Snake has to figure out the right time to make the hang glider jump. You're apparently supposed to throw a few smoke grenades to figure out when the wind is right, but you don't actually have to do that. Instead, you can just smoke a cigarette for a bit and suddenly you can jump off the veranda without any problems. Seems about right. Well, on the other side of the crevice, Snake first has to contend with another henchman called Jungle Evil. This sneaky bastard is apparently an expert on ambushing his enemies, but as long as you have a decent amount of rations and or you located the body armor, you can basically just stand in one spot and fill him with bullets whenever he pops out. Then we come to what has to be the goofiest, stupidest, most nonsensical part of this and possibly any other game I've ever played. You see, there's this detention camp Snake needs to get into, but it's blocked by a guard and a laser fence. How do you deactivate it? Oh, you'll love this. You have to use an owl that will hoot, making the guard think it's nighttime, causing him to turn off the fence. Where the hell do I even begin with this? I mean, this has to be one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever witnessed, but that's exactly what makes it so utterly glorious. Seriously, this is just amazing in how completely ridiculous it is. What kind of piss-brained idiot of a god would actually think it's night just because he hears an owl? For that matter, why the hell would Snake just assume this would work? He'd be better off trying to short-circuit the laser fence by peeing on it or something. Pretty much any plan would be better than this nonsense. This is still a brilliant segment though. I mean, you certainly won't be forgetting it anytime soon, will you? It's just so ludicrous and silly that you can't help but laugh your way through it, and nowhere near enough games do these sort of totally out there, completely absurd, but inexplicably entertaining moments, especially not anymore. So after successfully making it past this detention camp, Snake is once again ambushed by Night Fright, a legendary mercenary wearing a state-of-the-art stealth camouflage and wielding a completely silent gun. This may sound like it makes him impossible to beat, but like you're told by a mysterious fan that keeps calling Snake, you just have to use your ears. You see, the room you're in has 4 sections, each of which have different kinds of floors that all make different noises when stepped on. As such, you'll know where Night Fright is hiding based on the noises you hear. I'd still recommend having a few rations handy just in case, and I'd also recommend using the submachine gun as that's more likely to land more hits. In the next room, Snake is hindered by 3 puddles of what is apparently supposed to be sulfuric acid. These puddles will instantly kill you if you walk over them, so how can you prevent this? By using a ration containing chocolate, of course. Yeah, that's a pretty decent solution, I guess, but I think I may know of a slightly more convenient one. Just jump over the stuff. I mean, it's a tiny little puddle, not a fucking lake. Either way, after clearing the puddles, Snake is finally able to enter the cell where the doctors are being held, but unfortunately, Marv is already dead. It also turns out that Madnar was the one who killed him, as he's been working as a double agent for Zanzibar Land all along. Upon being found out, Madnar attacks Snake by trying to choke him out, as Snake has to fend him off. There isn't actually any way to get Madnar to release his grip without killing him though, but as he's behind you, there are only so many things you can do. I've heard that it's possible to use mines, but I tend to use remote control missiles to take this guy down. I'm not sure what this guy is made of though, as he can somehow withstand multiple missiles directly to the back before actually dying. In any case, after defeating him, we need to get into that locker, and according to Madnar, we apparently received a key from Gustava, but where is it? Well, it's actually the brooch. As it turns out, it's made of a so-called shape memory alloy that makes it change shape at different temperatures. This means you now have to go all the way back to the first building of the game. Okay, even I will admit that this is fucking annoying as hell, and there's absolutely no way around it. Even if you already knew about this and froze the brooch before coming here, it will change back to its normal form way before reaching this point, so you'll have to go back no matter what. Thankfully, it is possible to cut back a bit on the travel time by hiding in a cardboard box and sneaking into some of the trucks found around the base. If you do so, you'll be transported directly back and forth between the various buildings, eliminating the need to trek all over the areas in between them. It still doesn't make the backtracking any less tedious, but at least it's something, I guess. So after freezing the key and opening up the locker, Snake finds a game cartridge containing the Oilix information after doing a bit of pest control. Before Snake can leave the cell though, Madnar uses his dying breath to tell Snake that the only way to destroy the new Metal Gear is to throw grenades at its legs, as that's where the armor is thinnest. So basically, this new Metal Gear is technically worse than the original, as it's actually even easier to destroy. I mean, you can just chuck a bunch of grenades at whichever leg you want and it'll eventually blow up. That doesn't sound like much of an improvement. Snake then falls through a trap door and is met by Grey Fox piloting Metal Gear, which as mentioned turns out to be remarkably easy to destroy. Sure, I do like the fact that this is at least an active battle against a moving enemy that actually tries to kill you, and I do love the design of this thing, but like I said, it's an almost insultingly easy fight. Things thankfully don't end with this battle though, as the resulting explosion somehow sets all your gear on fire, meaning you actually have to rid yourself of every single item and weapon you have. Snake and Grey Fox then face each other in a minefield and decide to duke it out once and for all in hand-to-hand combat. I can only think of one thing that would make this setup any more epic. After defeating Grey Fox, Snake is lured out by a mysterious voice, which turns out to be Big Boss himself. This means a completely unarmed Solid Snake now has to face off against the machine gun wielding Big Boss in one of the most awesome boss fights ever. As you should have noticed, there are plenty of smaller rooms around you, most of which contain a keycard. Once you acquire a keycard, you have to access a new room where there'll be a new keycard and so on and so forth until you finally get a hold of your only means of defense: a lighter and a spray can. Yes, this is totally fucking real. Armed only with your new makeshift weapon, you now just need to find Big Boss and light that fucker on fire. With Big Boss gone, Snake and Holly meet up again as they both head for the extraction point. After the helicopter pilot saves them from being captured, they all fly off into the sunset as the game ends with Snake apparently disappearing into the wilderness. This game is simply amazing. It still holds up remarkably well, and I would say it actually does certain things better than several modern games I can think of. Sure, it has some flaws, and even I would love to see a remake if it was done even half decently, but it honestly doesn't need one. After all, it was already kinda remade in what is arguably the most popular and most influential entry in the series. In fact, this entry was so successful and spawned so much material that I think it's going to need its very own episode.